I think back to that meeting in that office and that one short question, and it's literally like I ran off to Chico State and got a degree in physical education and pursued a master's degree in exercise physiology because that's what you had to have to coach at the collegiate level, which at the time was kind of the dream.
Okay.
And so just knowing people that well and being that connected to someone that you can ask the right questions and get them thinking to make their own decisions. I think about how hard I worked in my running in college versus high school. And sure, there's some maturity level there, probably of just me growing up a little bit. But it probably, I don't remember the questions, but it was probably him asking some similar question and more me making the decisions on my own that I was going to pursue a higher level of running.
Yeah. In my profession, we ask leading questions, and one of the rules when you're asking leading questions, you never ask a question you don't know the answer to. But he was brave enough to ask that open-ended question, but had insight into his audience. It sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, one of the wisest guys I know, mentor in my life, a fellow named Ken. He he asks the best questions. So, I'll be ranting about whatever it is, this problem, this issue I want to run around with him, and then he'll ask a simple question, and it's corrective, encouraging, all at the same time. Sounds like Jim Middleton might add some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably such a humble man, and I don't know how comfortable he would even be hearing me say, like probably the most influential person in my life, but I know that I've gone out of my way to make sure he knows that.
Yeah.
I've said those exact words to so many people, and I think in my coaching, I may never be able to like put down on paper what it was that made him a great coach and then try to emulate that. But even just from an inspiring level of care for people and probably optimism, I would never go into his entire story, but he went through a lot. And his level of optimism with himself and his wife was inspiring. And I've been meaning for a couple of years to actually bring him in and have him talk with the U Prep team. And this is a great reminder that I need to make that actually happen.
Yeah. I wonder how many of us share a story like that about a coach, somebody coming alongside of us in those. There's really not a lot worse than high school. You stepped in at under 5 foot and under 100 pounds, and then there's a high school senior, who's walking around with a beard at 200 pounds and 6'2". That's a tough environment. So having those great coaches come alongside of us is super important.
For sure. And I think coaching is such a gift, right? I mean, I try to treat coaching with such honor or respect, whatever word you want to kind of put into that, because there's a closeness that an athlete and a coach have that I think that relationship is actually really rare, more rare than we probably give it credit for, right? And this is like not taking anything away from teachers. I think they're heaven sent. But a lot of times a teacher will see a student for 50 minutes and they see him for a long period of time. And it's like, think about any other relationship where a teenager has 2 hours with someone 5 days a week. Like they
Right.
probably don't have 2 hours 5 days a week with their parents.
Right.
And so, I personally take that responsibility as a coach. It's a really important role, and I try my best with coaches that are surrounding me to encourage them to recognize that it's not about the X's and O's of the sport. It's about what they're learning through sport, the relationships they're creating through sport, all of those types of things. It's a bigger responsibility than I think sometimes we give it credit for.
Yeah, that's something that I like that you're thinking outside of just like you said, the X's and O's. I was talking with a pastor, and he spent time in a part of the world where you couldn't be out with your faith. It was a risk to life. And in fact, one of the pastors at a pastor's conference he'd been at was actually killed for his faith. And this is recent. This is stories in the last 5 years. So this is still what a significant part of the world is like. And in a meeting, in a different context, he said, in America, sports is God. And I think, a lot of times when we're running our kids around, it does feel like it's ruling in our life. But then I like the way you're approaching coaching, that sports is a place where you learn relationships, you learn overcoming difficulty, you learn so much more than just how to run faster, how to jump higher, how to put the ball in the hoop or past the goal line or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, it really is, and I mean, I think it's what has drawn me back to it. I know in our before we started, we were talking about, I commonly say that, coaching is my passion. I catch myself all the time saying like that's really why I was put here. And I think it's because there's just so much inside of it. I look back, especially in cross country and track, very unique sports that sometimes are just very overlooked, up against football, basketball, some of the traditional sports. But if you really think about cross country and track, they put boys and girls together on a team, and you might toe the lines separately, but throughout the season, you're training and traveling and doing those types of things together. And it's like you don't have that in football, you don't have that in basketball, right? And there's you talk about relationships, and I think back to when I took over UPrep, it was first year after COVID. We had 4 returning athletes. And we're like, oh my gosh, we got to rebuild this thing. And through a lot of hard work, we got 18 kids that season, so that was great.
Did you have to use a rope?
Yeah, probably I might have gotten 22.
Okay.
So I just remember we'd have like team dinners, and a prime example of just like how kids grow up in sport and the influence, right? And I remember you put food out with a bunch of teenage distance boys, that food's gonna be gone fast,
Right.
And I remember like pulling all the boys aside, like, sorry, girls eat first. And I was like, it's like if this is gonna be how we behave. And it was so cool to witness the boys over time. Now I see senior boys with freshman boys that come in, and the food gets put out, and a young boy will start moving, a senior boy will pull them back and be like, no, our girls team eats first. And it's just, I mean, it seems like such a small thing, but they're spending 10 hours a week or more in this environment. And
Right.
what can that environment do to grow their character, grow their politeness, grow their their commitment to our community. So we do a lot of volunteering hours with like Sweat Running Club at the races, running aid stations and things like that, so that they're learning how to give back and those types of things. So I become maybe borderline emotional, but definitely super passionate about like there's so much more than the fact that we put one foot in front of the other and run.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't want to. You said, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. To me, it does actually seem like that big a deal because the vast majority of your runners are probably not going to run in college. And if they ever do run in college, the chances of any of them running at a professional or an Olympic level is pretty slim. I've coached youth sports, 14 years, and I've never had a pro athlete come out of any.
Right.
That could be due to the coaching. I acknowledge it's likely due to the coaching, not their natural athletic ability, but they're all going to go on and be husbands, wives, members of their community, have to interact with different people from different backgrounds, and learning that, managing it well, giving to the community, which we all take from, even if we don't realize we're taking from it. Just existing in a community is taking something from the community. They're learning that through sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's great to be conscientious of that, especially with the realism that, we might not be coaching the next Heisman Trophy winner or Olympic medalist or something along those lines, but we are coaching a human.
Yeah. Well, and more reason to not be so obsessed with like the sport aspect of it, right? Like, especially through running. I mean, there's perseverance, there's patience, there's, one of the things that I think has been so lost in our society is delayed gratification, right? I mean, we just live in this instant world, and from training, there's nothing instant overnight about becoming faster as a runner. And so I look at running and under those levels, and I just think like these kids are better off 4 years later to have, if nothing else, they had to learn like, to make progress, I have to be patient. I have to be disciplined. I have to enjoy that process and learn to let go of the fact that I'm not going to be faster tomorrow. I might not be faster next month. I'm going to be faster maybe by the end of the season.
Right.